Hello, everybody. Welcome to Our World Today, the Unionist Perspective. Very happy to be with you on this weekly live discussion. Today, we have a few things to talk about, but mainly what I guess was the highlight of the week, sadly, was the terror attack on Moscow. So we're going to focus a little bit on that at the beginning of our discussion. And yeah, if you'd like to join us, please don't hesitate to comment in the live chat if you are on our Facebook Live, and also comment on our YouTube video if you're on YouTube. Yeah, so Sage and Isaiah researched that topic, and so like the geopolitical implications of what happened, and yeah, we'd like to kind of go into details there. And just for people who don't know, this week, basically there was an attack on a hotel in the capital of Russia. And yeah, it's just been everywhere in the news. Like it was like pretty much a tragedy. Like the hotel is in pretty bad shape and there are a few victims. And um we'd like to talk about how it happened in terms of politics between Putin and the US. So Sage, would you like to kind of just list everything that happened prior and during this attack?
Yeah, the basic outline of this is that before the attack, the US government warned the Russian government that there was the possibility that um, Islamic militants or terrorists were going to do an attack on large gatherings in Moscow, and even to the extent that the US Embassy put out a public warning so that all Americans in Moscow could be aware of it beforehand. But Putin's response has basically been to put the blame on Ukraine and the West while avoiding mentioning the Islamic State, even though the Islamic State took responsibility for the attacks. So he's been trying to say that this was somehow coordinated by Western countries in Ukraine, and that Ukraine was trying to provide an escape route for the attackers afterward. So, and like we said, the Islamic State has claimed responsibility. So they've definitely established themselves as, the ones who did the attack, or at least they're trying to. And the attackers who were arrested were all from Tajikistan, a former Soviet republic in Central Asia. So they could have easily been involved, in the Islamic State Khorasan, which is the part of ISIS in that region. So what we're going to look at is if Putin's claim that Ukraine helped engineer the attacks is true, then that could be a war crime. It'd be a huge departure from Ukraine's strategy into doing like terrorism. But Ukraine's never used those tactics against Russia. And Putin could be using this strategy just to distract from his own country's problems while blaming others for what went wrong. So that is going to be the basis for this discussion.
And could you explain a little bit like why there was like that heightened risk that Islam would attack Russia?
Oh, that the Islamic State would? U.S. intelligence had just been picking up on that for like a long time. Islamic State, they said, had been putting out a lot of propaganda apparently that was like anti-Russia.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have there's more background to it, but they basically Russia had been supporting like Iran and Bashar al-Assad in the Middle East, and they're like um, Shia and Alawite Muslims, and Islamic State is like they're Sunni Muslims and they're like opponents to them.
Okay.
In Syria.
So they were supporting people, their enemies.
Yeah,
basically. Okay.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Right.
yeah.
So that's Pretty interesting. Like it seems, well, that we have a lot of ground on how basically this attack happened. And I want to go deeper into that. But first of all, I want to express from all of us like our condolences and thoughts and prayers for everyone that is involved in the attack and Russian people for what happened, obviously. And just know that this is a very sensitive topic, so we're going to go into more like a political side, so remove from any like emotion and the actual events of the attack, but more like what happened before and why this happened. So first of all, let's go into like the US government and Russia. So basically, it would seem, I don't know, but the CIA has a duty to warn. Basically, they have a policy that is a duty to warn other governments from impending terrorist attack, which seems fair, especially accounting for the way we work in the Western world and how we try to collaborate in order to minimize the international risk of such a thing happening. And yeah, they basically warned Iran at the beginning of the year. And then they warned, I guess, Russia, which and there was like an attempt to attack on March 7th, is that it?
Yeah.
And how did Putin react when there was such a thing happening? Like, what did he say exactly?
He didn't make any public reaction, and I don't think the warning was publicized. It was just like a private thing, and it was reported later.
Mm-hmm.
But he did take it seriously, and because they were able to thwart the attack. Like there were literally people planning to do it. So yeah, in that case, definitely took the warning seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the attack on March 7 was thwarted, and obviously, like, yeah, he responded to that. And then March 22nd, when the attack happened, the source of media seems to say that he was just dismissing it as an attempt to destabilize Russia this time. Um, and yeah, yeah, it seems like there's just going to be a lot of things that he has to arrange. But I would like to know like why, or just ask a question. How do you feel? Like why would he ever make such a statement about like people trying to destabilize Russia?
Well, because it kind of feels like when somebody's whole so when somebody is living based off of a lie, like they're telling people they're manipulating someone, they're telling people a lie, like you've got to keep lying, you've got to keep your narrative going,
Okay.
right? Like, so I think that for him, he judged it as like it would be worse for him politically to be like, oh, thanks, America. Like, you guys are really cool sometimes. Thanks for warning us. His, I think he would have like lost face or something. But the US made the warning public because, you know, at least partly because they want to protect Americans who were in Moscow.
Mhm.
So they just wanted everyone to know that. So, yeah, I think it was just for his own political gain, basically, or to prevent that, you know, admitting the US would help them.
Yeah. I don't know, my feeling about this is that there's just this feeling in countries like Russia and China where it seems like they don't necessarily acknowledge the power of having relationships with other people in the world. And I guess the second time around, it felt like it was like one time too many. And he was just like, we're not going to be with the US, which seems like a little bit, how can I say this, cliche, maybe. But yeah, I think it maybe probably aligns with the way Russia has been handling communication and politics since probably like the 60s, 70s. And yeah, it's a little bit weird that it would do that, but especially now at the moment, since like the beginning of the year, where there is like a renewal of threats to a lot of nations in terms of like national security. I would just feel like it's just a little bit weird, but yeah, I don't know. How do you guys see that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely had good reason to take it seriously with the attack in Iran, like in early January. The US, like you said, warned Iran about an attack, and then there was one, and it was pretty bad. So where close to 100 people died in that one. And so, yeah, the Islamic State is definitely like on the move right now, unfortunately there. But one thing that I wanted to say though was some news media outlets were quick to say that, oh, like Putin completely ignored this, like he just didn't want to listen to the US, and then look what happened. And that probably is a factor, but we have to keep in mind that, like, first of all, like Moscow is a metro area of like more than 20 million people. Like Moscow and the suburbs, like just connected to it. So it's such a huge area. It's definitely difficult to secure it. And, we know obviously people in the US and other countries know that like terror attacks, people do their best to prevent them, but they can't always.
Yeah.
So there weren't the like um, Federal Security Service was like pretty close. I think they were like they arrived within like 30 minutes of the call. There were security guards at the event, but the terrorists, like took out some of them. So they tried to, but we don't really know. Like we don't really have that information, right? We don't really know like if Putin did beef up security or if he did just literally kind of ignore it.
Mhm.
Um, Russia is certainly really stretched for that kind of resource right now because of the Ukraine war. So, but we can't really know that for sure. But we do know the attitude that he took to it publicly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I like that you say that because I think it adds a little bit of depth and nuance, I guess, to what happened. Because, you know, there are a lot of times in terror attacks where people are quick to want to find someone to blame, or basically like for anything that happens that is bad. And I would say, even though like the attitude was definitely not the best, um, it's still something of a terror attack. I think what was the worst thing, so to speak, would be how he explained it afterwards, saying maintaining that basically this probably was something from Ukraine and the West, while avoiding the Islamic State, while ISIS actually like claim responsibility. So yeah, there's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of a weird energy, I would say, to claim that the West and Ukraine would go to that extent to destabilize Russia. But
Mm.
however, there's something that comes to mind when I'm saying this, and it's the fact that for us, I guess Westerners, it doesn't seem like it's logical, you know? It doesn't seem like something that we would ever do in order to win a conflict with somebody. But in the mind of how, or the narrative of what Putin is playing into, um, it would seem like kind of somewhat of a, you know, spy mission in order to destabilize Russia, but bigger. And when I say this, that doesn't really feel good. I feel like it's really disrespectful to the experience that people have had there. But it's definitely kind of the energy of what it is implying to me. But I don't know how you guys feel about that. I would say this is like kind of my feeling of this. It doesn't feel good, but it seems like, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like the number one thing here for me that comes to mind and is that if you're going to make a claim like that, you have to have credible evidence. Otherwise, it looks and really feels like being manipulative, right? And just trying to blame someone and just trying to take the attention off
Yeah.
yourself, you know.
Yeah, he doesn't really care about reality though, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, yeah, so but it's like trying to use it as part of his like narrative. So, I mean, even if it were true, which if it were true, then there would be serious conversation to be like extremely serious reckoning to be had. Because if that were true, it would be saying that Ukraine's strategy is now branching off into like terrorist attacks to kill tons of innocent civilians in Russia, which has never been their way of doing this, you know, of fighting the war. So yeah, I just feel like it comes off as really like manipulative and just false, but for some in Russia, yeah, it could seem realistic, but other people can see through it, you know. They just like um yeah, like they can, a lot of people in Russia could see through it, but I think part of the reason too, I read a detailed analysis of it from someone, and this person was saying that he could be trying to use this attack to increase support for the war in Ukraine because actual support for the war is estimated to be like quite low.
Mm.
And it's people don't speak out about it and aren't open about it. Yeah.
I feel so disrespectful though
Yeah.
to like what
Yeah.
actually, you know.
Hmm.
It would feel weird. It would feel very weird. Yeah. Yeah. That's a bit, yeah. I was going
Yeah.
to say weird for the third time. I think we got it. And then the last biggest thing in this is that the attackers were from Tajikistan. And that's funny because I do think we talked a little bit about these former Soviet republics last year and the fact that there was like a Muslim minority that wasn't necessarily like or majority, depending on the former republic, that wasn't necessarily granted their rights and that started peacefully protesting for some of them. I don't think it was Tajikistan though.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and there was that kind of um Moscow based administrator someone from Russia, basically. I was an administrator there, and I think people were unhappy with the fact that they didn't have a freedom of just like expressing themselves and expressing their religion and the freedom of movement and things like that. And it would feel it's kind of I would say it's kind of weird and ominous that we talked about it last year, even though it's just a little bit, and that we see people actually from these countries like attacking, not all, obviously, but people um that are in the ISIS group, but that are from Tajikistan attacking Russia in that way. And I know basically ISIS has declared Russia as a public enemy, but to have support from former Soviet republics feels like I don't know what it feels like, but yeah, it feels like a lot of people were critical from Russia, and I guess like everywhere there is extremism. And so basically the critics that are in the extreme groups like kind of so fit to take actions. And yeah, what are your thoughts on this? Like um
Yeah, it feels kind of like a grudge. Like there's definitely an old grudge among some people, right, in the former Soviet republics against Russia. That's no secret. There are a lot of people who don't feel that way at all, right? But the people that we're talking about were the people who did the terror attack, and so they obviously do have some of that. And yeah, there's just been a lot of like Islamic State is like saying they are trying to.
hello? Oh, I think they froze. They froze. So
Go
basically,
after anyone. So Bashkortostan. Yeah. So the thing about this is like the the Central Asian population in Russia is pretty significant. They do a lot of like work in Russia, like they're important to the Russian economy, as immigrants. And in the past, like I think it was in 2017 or something, 2018, there was an attack in St. Petersburg on a metro by someone from Uzbekistan. And this happened. And then pretty much every time somebody from another former Soviet republic does something like that, or every time a former Soviet republic expresses like a disagreement with Putin, there have been crackdowns on those people in Russia. So there were like um, back then there were like deportations of people, arrests, like abuses of their rights. They like kidnapped people's kids, after that terror attack. Like it was like they kind of just like go ballistic to try to like show the Russian people that we're doing something about this or something, but it creates a climate of terror in the country.
yeah,
But now Putin isn't wanting to do that. Like he's not wanting to emphasize, oh, this was Islamic State. Oh, these people were from Tajikistan, because he doesn't want to alienate those countries and those communities in his country anymore, because he's more dependent on them than ever to keep the country running economically while the war is going. So I guess we don't know that for sure, but it seems that would probably be what's happening, unless he's learned from his mistakes in the past and he's like, oh yeah, we shouldn't like foment, you know, ethnic hatred, but I don't think that I have no reason to believe that that was his line of thinking,
yeah.
but yeah, it's definitely better.
Yeah, you froze for a little bit, but we got the gist of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it got back to normal when you were talking about the situation in Central Asia and the fact that every time that this happens, for example, like with Uzbekistan, there is a crackdown and things like that. And what I want to say to this is, I guess for Russia to have a crackdown on all of these countries to try to maintain control, I would say you can only um alienate, well, I cannot say that in English. You can only be do that so much to people. You can only have that sort of control and even like a little bit of violence, I would say, and restrictions on people so much. Like we've seen this in Iran, like you cannot like control the people completely. And I guess we see this more and more with Central Asia. And I would say even even though he wanted to continue the narrative of this is the fault of Ukraine and the West, and Ukraine is the attacker, which I guess serves in a very dark way his purpose and narratives. I would say it's also maybe a good thing that Tajikistan or all of Central Asia wasn't in the limelight so much. Um, because yeah, of course, like first of all, it's going to need these people in order to like get the country running. And I would say like you're going to, even though this isn't like the appropriate response, I guess you're going to have even more risk of alienating, now there I can say it, alienating people um and having more of these attacks. So but I think people from extreme groups would do these attacks anyway, so this isn't like I guess we shouldn't go into like the details of whose fault it is there or why he's blaming Tajikistan, because it doesn't feel quite right, all of this situation and narratives. But the thing that you mentioned in your research, and I think it is important to conclude on, is the fact that all of this, and I didn't want to necessarily say this in the announcing of the discussion, but the implications of all of this is that we see the relationships of Russia with Ukraine, with the West, with Central Asia, but also with ISIS and the Middle East. And it's very, I would say, I almost have compassion. I would say I have compassion for the Russian people, because it feels like a lot of people, it could feel like a lot of people are against them right now. But also, I don't think the West is and Ukraine is necessarily against them. It's all like they're against the the attack and the way they're treated in like the relationship between them and Russia. And there's also this thing about I guess the alienating thing with all of the countries. It seems like there's a little bit of backlash, and obviously that never excuses a terrorist attack and the actions of a terrorist group. But there is definitely this component of like, it does feel like Russia is against the world. And sadly, that's the narrative that Putin wanted. But in pushing that narrative, maybe he did kind of, you know, manifest that. It's a little bit weird and a little bit disturbing to see that, but I feel like there's a little bit of a component of that, and I would like to hear you guys, what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think you said that really well. Like that's such a great way to tie it up. Like he's like he wants the Russia against the world narrative, but that's how it can pan out. And so yeah, the only other thing I was thinking was like this incident was an attempt by like life, the universe, whatever, maybe the divine, you could say, to like humble, you know, Putin and the Russian government, basically, right? Because like there are opportunities, like if they could be humble about it and be like, oh, okay, like, you know, maybe we should take your warning seriously. Maybe we shouldn't blame people without reason for this. Maybe we should attend to the fact that we have, you know, there's ISIS that has like beat.
No. Okay, so seems like
Keep
they're
with us, and maybe we
yeah, you guys froze for a bit.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
right.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Anyway,
back.
yes, we're back. That's all that I felt about it. But it's a terrible tragedy for Russia, and it's not something that anyone should like. I don't know. It should just be taken for what it is. It's like a terrible tragedy,
Yeah.
and hopefully they can, as a whole, like we can learn the lesson from this. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think you said it perfectly. It's really like there's a little bit of weirdness about this topic because of how tragic it is, and we want to respect everyone and how they're feeling in this situation. But also, like, there are a lot of things that we can say as people who analyze the news that just feel like we should talk about it, and it feels like we should talk about the relationships of Russia with other people and how this plays out here. And I hope that other people can also give their input there. So definitely like, comment and see like how we can like interact and what you think about this situation, because obviously like we don't have all the answers. We're just looking at what the situation is here for a pretty like important event in the life of Russian people. But piggybacking on that, I would say that we can talk a little bit shortly about NATO and the fact that Sweden finally joined NATO on March 7th, which is also kind of the day where there was like one of the terrorist threats, which is kind of a weird parallel. But basically, Sweden became the 32nd member of NATO. And this is important because Russia, I think, would feel even more alienated by this event because they don't want NATO to move east and take part of, I guess, former, Soviet republics and Scandinavia and the Balkan and things like that. And so, yeah, but I think it's good for Sweden to kind of claim their relationship with world and national security, especially in these times where I think like all of us definitely need it, and we need that cooperation to kind of work together. So yeah, just a little bit of on that, and I don't know, how do you guys feel about this announcement of, you know,
Yeah, I think it's kind of a continuation of what you said at the end of the last topic. Again, like, you know, um, the government in Russia loves to use that Russia against the world narrative, or the world against Russia. And when they act on that and perpetuate it, that's what they get. They manifest that because Sweden and Finland had been having a policy of neutrality for a long time, especially Finland. Um, I think they had that for like 200 years. They tried to, their politics were basically do your best to like defend yourself when needed, but don't piss Russia off because they're your neighbor and they will come and fight you, basically. But now Finland let that go. Sweden let go of neutrality there. So it just shows that, yeah, Putin was like concerned about NATO expanding, right? And they're just like,
mm,
why are you guys like expanding toward us? Are you threatening us? And then Putin goes and attacks his neighbor, Ukraine, and then NATO's like, well, now we have even more reason to expand. So it's like ego doesn't make sense. Like the
yeah,
fear, ego, and evil they're ultimately self-defeating, even if it like doesn't look like it in all ways immediately. So yeah.
Thought it was awesome that I feel like they really like made a choice to like stand against like evil
Yeah.
and stand with good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing though, it's like I think you said it right, Isaiah. It's kind of a little bit, it's a simple, straightforward way to see it, but I would say that in this world where people are more and more polarized, and that polarization is a threat on your national security, like you can't really necessarily afford to be neutral on just about everything. So you kind of have to take a stance sometimes, and I guess for them that stance and that choice is NATO, whether it's good or not, for them. Like we'll have to see, but the core of it, at least, is definitely like a desire to stand for what feels right, and not just like stay, especially because the neutrality was invented because they didn't want to anger Russia, and not because it was I had a French expression in mind, but basically it kind of was a forced choice instead of like a willing choice. I don't know. I don't know how to say this in English, but yeah, I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it feels like I don't know, it feels like when all the Avengers come together in the movie, not, not to like be like too American or anything, but like it does feel like that because it feels like now everyone's on the same page in that whole Baltic Sea region. And it really makes for seamless military cooperation and integration there. And Sweden is like a military technology like powerhouse. Like they have awesome air force and aircraft manufacturing. They have like a great navy. Their submarines have like in like war simulations with the US, like their submarines like could beat US ones even and ships and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know the details of all of that, but just suffice it to say that yeah, like Russia can't really threaten other countries by sea as well anymore. And Russia has, that little piece of there's a little piece of Russia called Kaliningrad, bordering Poland and Lithuania,
Yeah.
that they could have used to threaten other countries, but now they pretty much, yeah, that would just be a suicide mission for them now.
Shut
Yeah.
down.
So
Yeah.
there we go. It's like
Yeah.
about having a boundary.
Yeah. And that's what I thought also about, yeah, boundary, definitely. And also like they would be spread thin, kind of like, they can be in Ukraine and Kaliningrad and in Central Asia at the same time, even though it would seem that by Putin's words that they could, I think like in terms of resources, like nobody can do that. Like, no sane person can have their resources spread like that. So yeah, that's really really good step forward in terms of like protection and security there, it would seem. And I think our next topic is also a topic that is on a specific country but has had international repercussions. And it's the fact that the United Nations are warning about the situation in Sudan, and basically about the multiplication of sexual exploitation of children and trafficking, and the fact that it's coming on top of a humanitarian crisis that has been on for a while in Sudan, where basically like you know 9 million people have been displaced because of war. And yeah, I would say it's a little bit weird, like it's a little bit of an unknown situation for a lot of people, but basically when Sudan and South Sudan fought in war, like there weren't just like one conflict, it would seem. And basically the United Nations were kind of hoping that the crisis, the humanitarian crisis would abate with years and with diplomatic separation and intervention of the blue cask. I don't know how you say this in English, but like the soldiers of United Nations with other countries, like basically intervening in areas of conflict. But it didn't. Like it seems like and we can talk about this and we can talk about the situation in Congo as well. Not that we studied it today, but basically about the fact that a lot of people are being killed in like the Congo Democratic Republic. And there's just this, it seems, pattern of seeing conflicts and their repercussions on people that already don't have much, like increasing and worsening instead of getting better. And so I would like to like quickly, because like I don't know how much you guys know about this topic, but how do you guys feel about that? How about what's happening there?
Mm. Yeah, it feels like it just shows how like important it is to have boundaries against criminal behavior, and how important it is to have and uphold rule of law and stuff like that. But when a civil war like this is happening, it becomes more difficult. But yeah, I don't know. I have yeah, I have compassion for all those people involved and stuff in Sudan. And but I don't really know a whole lot about this.
Yeah.
So besides
Yeah,
saying that,
we were talking about it a little bit before. The only thing that came to me was just like, this is what it looks and feels like when ego like just runs things, and it's kind of taken over, and it's like, yeah, there's no order. No, there's
Yeah.
no order.
Yeah, so basically I would say like yeah, there's no order. I think you're right about that. So for people who don't really know, like the Sudanese government is fighting with a subgroup of an armed group called Rapid Support Group, who are basically like just raiding territories. And Sudan is really big, but they're raiding territories and displacing people and trafficking people and using people, seemingly on both sides, sadly, even the Sudanese government, in order to kind of win this war. And so I would say for someone who doesn't know the situation, they would just like, they would say like, hey, just we would like to have order in the government again, so that we can, be at peace. But it seems like both are really corrupt and using tactics that are not okay at all. And I think a lot of what we talk about tonight is a mirror of like the disrespect of human life and human bodies for a lot of people. We see that, yeah, we see that in Russia a little bit, although in a different way. We see that in Africa and in Sudan now. We see that a lot. We see that in Israel and Hamas, like conflict. It's a little bit, weird to see how many regions in the world are facing that. And basically that's all the information that we have. Like we have the statement issued by the United Nations about calling both Sudanese government and the RSF, Rapid Support Group, to cease these tactics. And that's all. We have a little bit of geographical context, and that's it. And I think, I'm on TikTok, so I see this thing about the genocide in Congo and things like that. And my desire, my wish as a human being who sees all of that, I just would wish that we would have like more information, because we don't know who released the information, we don't know where the resources and money goes, we don't know what happens exactly to these people, we don't know how to help physically. It seems like we can only do so much indirectly, and it seems like the UN also doesn't have necessarily like a sway when the conflict is like so bad and so deep already. And so I don't know, I feel like just a desire to not have, like graphic context, but know more about these things and like what we could do, or maybe it's powerlessness to, because I don't have any say in like the insane choices of some people, and maybe that's it, you know. And yeah, that's just my feeling on it. It's kind of an unfinished thought for me, you know.
Yeah, when I was reading the article, I felt too from the perspective of the UN people who were there trying to provide humanitarian aid in Sudan, and I was like, wow, yeah, like it takes a lot of courage and compassion to, be in that situation. But it's like they can't provide aid if their like offices are being like ransacked and destroyed and stuff. I mean, they can try to, or there's other ways to deliver aid that don't involve like having an office or a space somewhere. Like you can like airdrop supplies and stuff, or they had like women and girls safe spaces, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, like if they're being, you know, yeah, if they're being raided and stuff and offices
Yeah.
destroyed and it's hard to provide help. And so I understand that. I also felt that with Sudan's government right now, I think they came to power in a coup in the recent years. They're one of the countries where that happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it feels really not clean or good at all. And it's kind of one of those situations where like you live by the sword, you die by the sword kind of thing, because like it's a very, very cynical scramble for power and resources there. Like that government that arose in the coup and the rapid support forces, like who cares like what they say? They're just trying to get their hands on the resources and power of being in charge, and it's very sad and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
they, I don't know. I don't know what's really needed there. I mean, I guess just to have a strong boundary with all of that and stuff like that. And yeah, and I
Yeah.
don't know about the Congo situation, but I know that Congolese government was saying they wanted the UN to leave, right? Congo and stop collaborating with them.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them, actually. Not a lot of them, but they're part of like two African states that just wanted the international assistance to just leave, which is not a good sign in general. But yeah, we could probably like research and talk about Congo in a few discussions, because I just know what TikToks are saying, and TikToks are saying like there's a genocide and people are and children are sold in bags, which isn't very much, a good resource to go from. Yeah, and I just wanted to add that, especially for a big country, like airdrop resources are pretty, it's a lot of hassle to like organize them. instead of having aid on the ground. And it's kind of detached, which I don't think the UN was going for, but I'm guessing that they will have to if they cannot like ensure like the security and stability of their groups on the terrain. So yeah, we'll have to see. Hopefully we'll have some new information and development and reactions about that. Hopefully from the Sudanese government, but yeah, we'll have to see. And to finish our discussion today, we have like a last topic. And this topic is related to our resource crisis in the world, basically our crisis in oil and the high prices and things like that. And amidst the failure of some countries to provide oil and resources and electricity for their people due to the Russia-Ukraine war, there are some countries that are thriving and their oil industry is doing very well. And one of them is Norway. And Norway has contributed basically an extra $170 billion in oil and gas revenues just last year. And now they're asking themselves what they need to do about that. But basically, what happened is that they couldn't rely on Russia anymore, and it would seem that they had resources of oil that they're using right now. And it's just like, instead of having these resources and revenue outsourced to pay Russia, like they're just like staying in the country and the government is earning more. And so they're asking what they need to do about that. And I would like to just, I wonder because what tickled me when I look into this information is that there are a few countries, if not like a lot more countries that we realize that are profiting from, the oil and gas revenue. And I would say if I don't know, I wish I could have more information on that, but I didn't find it. I would say like if there was such a difficulty to find oil to like, have all the houses get the necessary resources, electricity and gas that they need during the winter. Like, why are a lot of countries profiting so much, like making so much extra revenue from it if like it's like more costly to pay for it? Obviously, for Norway, it's a little bit different because like the revenue is basically staying into their economy. But there are some countries where it's not, and they're still like the oil industry is still like benefiting a whole lot than they did in 2022. And yeah, I wonder like would that grant like a calibrating of how the oil prices are and the distribution of energy? But like that's an open question. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on it. That's really like up in the air. It was just my question for today.
When you say a recalibration of oil prices, what were you thinking about that? Like, are you thinking that oil prices would go lower because of this, or would go higher? Or I wasn't.
Well, I don't know how you guys are impacted since the Russia and Ukraine war, since you're producing a lot of like your own oil. But basically, for a lot of Europeans, the electricity bill has almost doubled, I would say, in the past few years for some of them. And yeah, I would say like the communication was that, you know, oil was more difficult to produce. Um, Although like the oil industry is making a lot of extra revenue, so isn't there like a discrepancy or maybe a gap between what was announced to be the price of oil production and what we can actually produce? And I don't say like I think Germany, for example, really is struggling with this and is in a recession because of this. But there are some countries, even Great Britain, surprisingly, where they had a little bit of an up in terms of economy, in terms of like the big recession that they thought they would experience. And yeah, it's just surprising to see that the oil prices are still getting higher because we're still getting higher. And
Yeah.
all of this extra revenue like up in the air, you know.
Oh, it could, I mean, I guess from a simpler economic perspective, it does kind of make sense because, Russia's supply of oil is completely not available, pretty much not available anymore to Europe. So yeah, there is lower supply, but the demand is just as high. So it does make sense
Mm.
that prices would be higher from that point of view. I've also heard something like, so people sometimes talk about like they blame the president, like in the US, they're like, oh, thanks, Obama. Oil prices are high, and or thanks, Obama was a meme in America where people would just blame
Right?
Obama everything. But now it would be thanks Joe or something. But the reality of it that they were saying was that um, oil prices aren't as simple as that. Like it's an
Mm.
internationally traded commodity, yada yada, complicated financial gobbledygook, boils down to lots of market factors or even how people feel about the value of oil and
Mm.
gas companies could
So
impact.
there's also a little bit indexed on stock markets, basically. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
yeah, and like the prices of oil yeah, it's not just straight supply and demand. It's like
Yeah,
the
I
things.
get that. But also I think this is kind of hypocritical from like, for example, the French government to say that citizens must make like a lot of efforts because we're going to be so low on supply. And yes, but also like what? You know, like there's supposed to be like kind of a crackdown of on the inflation of these prices, and it doesn't
Oh,
seem like it did
oh,
anything, or maybe like it needed to run its value. It needed to run on the market anyway. Otherwise, it would have just like installed a state of fear on the stock market, and that it would have been worse. Is that it? Or I don't know.
yeah, maybe, but I don't really know. It does. I see what you mean, especially since like Norway has been maybe producing, but definitely selling so much more
Mhm.
oil too. Like they've been able to step up supply, and make a lot of money off of it too. So yeah, I guess the question would be, why is there like um, this call for people to, like ration, right? Essentially, it's like it's not formal rationing, but
Yeah,
it's
to ration. Yeah, their own energy. Yeah, basically.
I don't know, but that's something that like we could totally delve into more. But it's something that usually mystifies people, like the price of gas. They're like, "What's causing this?" You know, let's find the person responsible.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well. we'll definitely have to look into it. I think it would be an interesting thing because I don't think we had such a reaction or like discrepancy since the beginning of the crisis of 2008. So yeah, let's definitely dive into it more. But for now, like we have reached the end of our discussion. So thank you to everyone who watched us live on Facebook, and thank you to everyone who's watching us on YouTube as well. If you enjoy these discussions, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment so we can do more of them. And also, you can also propose some topics that we would love to dive into them and study them and talk about them in the next few weeks. So thank you and see you next week. Bye bye.